You think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can...
not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is
Can I-
in big
can-
trouble.
can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No,
Can
you've
I
done a lot
answer?
of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not
I
winning.
know.
You're not winning this.
I...
You have a damn good chance of
we are
coming out
staying,
okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said thank
stupid
you.
president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about
if
West?
you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this, I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of times thank you to American people.
Except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on over here. I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the
I'm
cards.
thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
tell you
You're
again,
running
I
low
know.
on soldiers.
Don't-
Listen,
don't please,
you're running
Mr.
low on
President.
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And then
President.
then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look. If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't
it doesn't
with
matter
me.
for you what
that
what
wasn't
this
with me.
nation- it
That was
wasn't
with
you.
a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person.
But this
That
is
was
your,
with,
this
that was
is
with
your
Obama.
president. It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
Welcome, everyone, to Indications and Warnings with Chuck Farrer, co-produced by Alan Brewer. Chuck and I are recording this episode of Indications and Warnings on February 28th, 2025. It is day 1101 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. Chuck and I are recording this show earlier than usual, and it's partly because Volodymyr Zelensky is in Washington, D.C. today. Moments ago, his meeting in the Oval Office with President Trump and Vice President Vance concluded. Later today, at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, he will be speaking and taking questions at the Hudson Institute. I think everyone, especially given what happened in the Oval Office, will want to tune into that broadcast from the Hudson Institute this afternoon. You know, Chuck, I have seen some clips from the Oval Office meeting, and it was a heated meeting. Don't let anybody tell you differently. And it was heated primarily because Trump and Vance repeat Russian disinformation and talking points, exactly as Trump did when he met with Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer earlier this week. And I think this is the reason why, if people feel Russian disinformation, Russian talking points have experienced an uptick in the last few weeks, it's because Trump is spouting them.
He is indeed. And, people will remember you and I have been talking about information warfare, operations in the information space, inflecting the dialogue. Whoever gets there first and says the untrue thing, and almost no matter how outrageous or implausible, if you get to the field first and say, Chuck Farr is actually the Easter Bunny, I will be fighting a rear guard Easter Bunny effort for all eternity. And this, unfortunately, has happened, and I will put this as nicely as I can, to people and staffs of people who, by God, should know better. And if it's unwitting, their idiocy is unforgivable. And if it is witting, then they are no longer fit to serve their nation. And I can't put it more succinctly than that.
Well, Chuck, if you're the Easter Bunny, now I know why eggs are so damned expensive and why there are so few eggs to be found at the grocery store.
Exactly. I'm in it for myself and the egg cartel. But
well, I might pay my taxes this year with eggs, Chuck. I don't know.
I tell you, but folks, really think of that in that Easter Bunny analogy. Whoever gets there first and says something, it is human psychology to lock on to the initial stimulus upon which you will predicate your reactions. And until that initial stimulus is proven to be false and you reject it, which takes a process, it's always going to be banging around in here as your first point of information. That's why it's so effective.
What are some of the things Trump has said? And we'll get to the things he said in today's Oval Office meeting. But here are a few examples. Ukraine should never have started the war. This, of course, is purely a Kremlin talking point. Was there ever any question in your mind, Chuck, who started this war?
No, and I hate to say it, but we've got the video, right? We've got the video of the tanks smashing through the traffic cones at the frontier. We've seen that. We know that Minister Lavrov told Liz Truss 12 hours before the invasion that there wasn't going to be an invasion. We all know this. Ukraine did not provoke this war. They did not ask for this war. They were literally in the process of negotiations when the invasion went forward. Categorically false on that one, but we're hearing it in a round office at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah. Some other misstatements, outright lies, Russian talking points, Russian disinformation that Trump has repeated. It is because of Ukraine's wish to join NATO that Russia invaded Ukraine. And he said in a press conference or in a press chat, really yesterday in the Oval Office, NATO, Ukraine can forget about that. Any reason to believe that the potential membership of Ukraine in NATO is the reason Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine?
Well, let's just say let's examine, I won't speak to this individual, let's examine this guy's point of view here. Yeah, categorically. That was the casus belli. That was exactly why Russia invaded Ukraine. They wanted to join NATO. And as you know, Alan, the internal political policies of Ukraine, they are dictated from Moscow. Okay, so I agree with the president on that one. You got that one right, sir. I love taking these apart. I love taking them apart. Yeah, you're right. I forgot who was in charge. Sorry, my bust.
Well, the problem becomes there are now Trump appointees serving in the Defense Department, serving in various roles as trade negotiators, who, when asked a direct question in their confirmation hearings in the Senate, who started the war, they would either not answer the question, wiggle out of it by saying it's not in my mission in the administration to have to answer that question. So the fact that Trump is spouting this Russian propaganda, Ukraine started the war, the reason why Russia invaded is because Ukraine was a potential future member of NATO as well as the EU. Now there are people in the administration taking Trump's words and tone, repeating them, or evading direct answers to senators' questions. This is a huge problem when it comes to delivering facts to the president, who has to make the ultimate decision.
It speaks a lot of the character, the qualifications, and the moral compasses of these people. It says a lot. You know, to be that sycophantic, to know that your ambition trumps reality. I'm sorry, the same verb is used there. Really, you have to believe that black is white, up is down, east is west, and that Ukraine provoked Russia. To get what? To get an appointment into the senior executive service, right? To pretend that somehow it's right to betray Ukraine. I love taking these things apart. And you know what, Alan, you and I get to speak truth here. I'm not going to get appointed Deputy Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict. But if you give me a call, I might take that job. But look at it that way. Would I take that job in these conditions? No. I'm too big a boy. I'm too big a boy.
The thing that gets me, Chuck, is that all the evidence is already out there explaining why Putin chose to launch this full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This, by the way, after fighting an 11-year war now against Ukraine. People need to remember after annexing Crimea in 2014 and then setting up the fake People's Republics in Luhansk and Donetsk with Russian special military forces. This is all coming out again today, as a matter of fact, with new evidence that the little green men were all Russian special forces.
You know, as if that was ever in, question. But again, and we go back to whoever gets to the tabula rasa, the blank page, you get there first. And you say, look, I know they're wearing Russian equipment. I know their boots are Russian, their guns are Russian, their helmets are Russian, but there are no Russian flags. And these guys are indigenous forces tired of being mistreated as a Russian minority. And somehow that lie keeps banging around and has to be refuted. It's like the Ukrainian sailboat full of amateur frogmen in the Baltic. It has to be looked at again and again. But folks, whenever you circle back to that, do not get sucked into the Coriolis effect, which always leads down the toilet, right? So that's what I learned about the Coriolis effect. Don't fall for it. Don't predicate your impressions on these lies. And that's what they were.
And you can go down the toilet either clockwise or counterclockwise, depending if you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, but you're headed in one direction only, and that's down the pipe.
Exactly.
The other thing, if you don't get to the truth first and broadcast it in a way that people understand and embrace, you can undermine facts simply by increasing the volume of lies. This is what has been done in at least the last 3 years of this war, but it's certainly been done since Russia annexed Crimea. Well, here's what I would consider a lie that I heard Trump say today as he met with Zelensky. And again, nothing Trump says is scripted. It's stream of consciousness. Whatever goes through his head is what comes out his mouth. That is why Trump is so unpredictable and so chaotic. But this is what he said to Zelensky. This war would have been over in 2 weeks if you hadn't had U.S. weapons. Well, as I recall, Chuck, in the first 2 weeks of Russia's all-out invasion, Ukraine didn't have a lot of Western weapons.
No, they didn't. And that first 2 weeks of desperate fighting really set the tone for the entire war, right? That was the critical period in which Ukraine did the only thing it could do, which was not lose, right? Not surrender. That was the point. It fails to recognize Ukrainian valor. It fails to recognize Russia's own brutality and stupidity. And again, you know, we're circling back to that same point that somehow Russia was justified in trying to do to Ukraine what it did to Chechnya, what it did to Georgia, what it did to Moldova. You know, folks, I could just keep going, right? Those are just the ones that come to mind. They are an expansionist power. They are brutal. They have killed upwards of 50 or 60,000 non-combatant Ukrainian civilians and kill a couple hundred more every week deliberately. What's going on? Why a press ambush in the Oval Office with a visiting head of state? What?
Yeah, and it was a press ambush, and not with just any visiting head of state, but with the leader who I now regard as the leader of the free world. It's not Donald Trump, it's Volodymyr Zelensky.
I'm afraid that I concur. In terms of character, in terms of statesmanship, in terms of an individual who recognized that it was appropriate and necessary for his nation to do something that Donald Trump could not do, cannot do, and will never do, which is submerge his own ego in pursuit of a goal that is much, much, much larger than himself. And speaking as a former SEAL, that's about the lowest rating I can give to any human being anywhere.
You know who can control their own ego, and it's because he's a KGB trained agent. It's Vladimir Putin. It might sound like an odd thing to say, but that man does control his own ego. When there is a larger goal he is pursuing, that larger goal for him is the reassembly of the Russian Empire. There are lots of pieces to it. Ukraine, probably the biggest and most desirable, but also Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Kazakhstan. You could go maybe through the countries of Eastern Europe as well. These are at least countries within what Putin regards as the Russian sphere of influence, as they were when Stalin led the Soviet Union, or even before the Soviet Union collapsed altogether.
Yeah, there is definitely, and that's why I keep dropping the word imperial into this, because the Tsar was presided over an empire. And all of Russia's neighbors, all of them, have felt that the clutching Slavic hand at their throat. Every nation you just named. So there's another thing that doesn't enter into this. We bang on it a lot, but Russia approaching negotiations. I want everyone to have a true perception of what's going on in this war. Russia is tearing itself to pieces on the battlefield. They are weaker now than they have ever been since Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact before World War II, where Russia and Nazis were allies. Okay, let's not airbrush that out of the Great Patriotic War. Russia has, according to President Zelensky, and his estimations of casualties were actually lower than my own. He says 350,000 Russian soldiers are now dead and 750,000 are wounded so severely they will never return to combat. In 3 years, Putin has lost 1 million men. He's lost 17 times the amount of tanks that are owned by all of NATO. He has lost the total armed forces of Germany, Spain, France, the UK, and Poland. He is weaker now than he has ever been. Nobody needs a peace talk more than Vladimir Putin.
That's a very interesting point, Chuck. Really, I see the clash between Trump and Zelensky as between these 2 points. Trump practically asked Zelensky, well, do you want a ceasefire or not? Just tell us if you want a deal or not, because you don't have forever. If you don't want it, we'll walk away from it and you can fight on your own. That's essentially what Trump is saying to Zelensky. Well, what Zelensky is saying to Trump, are you going to provide security guarantees for Ukraine or not? Ukraine needs to know, because we are fighting for our freedom and our future, and we won't have either if we don't get security guarantees. It's a very simple equation.
And why on earth? And again, here's some truth, folks. We talk about getting there with the first information, whether it's right or whether it's wrong, and whether that resonates and inflects the discussion going forward. Let's not forget this first fact on the battlefield. The Budapest Declaration guaranteed Ukrainian security. Guaranteed it. When did that ever come into play? It didn't. It didn't. I'm afraid that President Zelensky is asking for something that the United States is no longer capable of giving in good faith. And that hurts me, because what I'm saying in real language is, why would you trust us? Afghanistan trusted us. Why would you trust us? South Vietnam trusted us. Why on earth would you want a U.S. security guarantee? Is it worth anything? I don't know. I know history, though.
I hope it comes to be worth something again, Chuck. It used to be worth something, and I think
it used to be worth something.
I think it will be worth something again. I hope so. I don't think I don't think it can be worth anything for at least 2 or 4 more years. Before going to the White House, Zelensky met congressional leaders, and earlier this week, 40 members of Congress signed a letter to Trump asking for continued military, economic, and humanitarian support of Ukraine, asking for security guarantees of Ukraine. And this demonstrates there's not only plenty of support for Ukraine in Congress from both Republican committee chairs like the Armed Services Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, various appropriation subcommittees, as well as Democratic ranking members. I happen to think that in a few weeks' time, you're going to see Congress try to come to the rescue of Ukraine and try to save Ukraine from Trump's very short-sighted focus on a deal. Trump got his mineral deal that with Ukraine, that's been signed, and the next deal he wants is a ceasefire deal. I don't think anybody should make the mistake of calling it a peace. It's not a peace. It's a deal. It's because Trump is a deal maker, not a peacemaker. But Congress can get into this fight.
I'm very glad you brought that up, because let's get rid of some of the invective and the rhetoric on both sides. you may not like Mr. Trump, but he is not a dictator, and he has dictatorial tendencies. I will grant anyone listening that, but he is constitutionally constrained with what he can and cannot do. He also has a wide-ranging agenda that can only be actuated if Congress approves. Remember, Congress controls all the money. And Alan knows this much better than I do. There is quid pro quo for everything at that end of the street, as I remember, and I used to call it that end of the street where Alan used to work. So the other thing is that the Senate and the Congress, they advise and consent treaties entered into by the United States of America. The checks and balances that were established by guys a lot smarter than me, and frankly, a lot smarter than most people I say who want to change things. If you're as smart as James Madison, then I'm willing to talk to you. But until then, I don't know.
Yeah, well, thanks for talking to me, Chuck, because I'm not as smart as
I'm not as
James
smart as I'm lucky
Madison.
I remember him.
And by the way, no one called him Jimmy.
Jimmy.
Well, that's a quick review of what happened earlier today. And it's, we run the risk of talking about it while events in Washington, D.C. are still unfolding. I can't watch President Zelensky and President Trump while Chuck and I are talking. So I only hope that there wasn't a fist fight.
Oh, jeez.
Look, there's a tremendous amount of information that Chuck and I are going to go through today from the zero line. And before getting to a lineup of maps, I have the impression that Ukraine is getting stronger every single day. There are now French Mirage fighter jets flying in Ukrainian skies, flown by Ukrainian pilots. I've seen evidence that Ukraine has used F-16s not only in the role of air defense, but now on some days, the increased role of close air ground support. There are some days now where Ukraine is flying 10, 12, 16 airstrikes over the battlefield. And this has been in Kursk, surprisingly, as well as around Pokrovsk in Donetsk. I think that is a pretty indicative sign that Ukraine is stronger, more free to use air power than they have been previously.
Yeah, definitely is. And, people who've been with us for most of the war will remember, F-16s are good. I was all for them. Let's get them there. It was never going to be something you snapped on like a light and watch the cockroaches scurry away. Building an air force, you have to mature the capability, the air crew, there are 30 or 40 guys standing behind every Tom Cruise to make his airplane go. And their training all takes years. It's a craft that is mastered. But 16, 17 airstrikes a day is pretty good. Because there are airstrikes and there are airstrikes. And previously Ukraine would count helicopter gunship coming in, putting its nose up and spray firing rockets over at the bad guys. That counted as an airstrike. Very happy to see that 2 of the airstrikes of the 17 or 18 that occurred in the last 24 hours used French AASM Hammer guided bombs. A pretty good looking weapon. If you look at it and use like a Spitfire, you look at it and go, that'll work. Of course, this one works. Of the targets they hit, one of them was an FSB headquarters area in Bryansk in Russia. Good job, guys, for cover, movement, and status. I think you'll be going back to the FSB Academy and working on those three things because you just ate a bomb. And the other one, which we'll get into, was in the Pokrovsk area, and they hit a very high-value target with spectacular results. And we'll get to that in a minute.
You know, the thing about Ukrainian airstrikes, you know, it's still possible that on overnight, you know, it's one or two. That was typical of Ukraine almost throughout this war because they didn't have the air power. But to see on a given day for double-digit Ukrainian strike numbers, that's impressive. Now, at the same time, Russian strikes using their glide bombs, again, outnumber the Ukrainian strikes, 10 or even 15 to 1. The Russians continue to use hundreds of glide bombs a day, both over the zero line and against Ukrainian cities. Chuck and I last week looked at a Russian glide bomb that had been downed outside Pokrovsk, and it became evident that Ukraine downed it using electronic warfare of some kind. I don't know exactly how Ukraine did it, but now there's further evidence that Ukraine is downing these Russian glide bombs, misdirecting them at least, because there's a lot of chatter about it on Russian Telegram channels, so that Russia now has to launch 10 or a dozen or more of these glide bombs in order to hit the target they're aiming at. Now, you know, what happens to the 15 that go off course or are brought down by Ukrainian countermeasures? Some of them are going to detonate and do a tremendous amount of damage, who knows where. But the point that Russians are complaining about is Ukraine has come up with a countermeasure that makes their glide bombs less effective than they were earlier.
Right. And, you know, happy to pat ourselves on the back regarding that downed Russian glide bomb. But what we could see from the photograph there, and if you go back into the timeline, Alan and I will both have it there, the weapon landed almost completely intact, which meant that as it was falling, it very likely was being, its own electronics were urging it to climb as much as possible so that it came in to the ground at a high altitude of attack and then skidded across the ground and remained almost completely intact, in fact, recognizable by type. We could actually make out the type of weapon. I'm very glad to hear that the Russians are complaining about it, which means that this is widespread. Many of these Russian weapons use GPS signals in a combination with GLONASS signals, which are the Russian equivalent. We're always going to see electronic countermeasures, electronic warfare, electronic countermeasures back and forth. But what's so vitally important about this, as Alan knows, and we've been saying it forever, if a Russian precision weapon falls off the rail of an aircraft, there is a 95% chance it is going to target an apartment building. That by far is their number one target. So in lieu of adequate air defenses, electronic warfare, which generally is an ancillary air defense effort, is coming to the fore. And this again is a absolute example of Ukraine taking the technology they have, facing the deficits for the technology they lack, and improvising. You know, I don't think it's a stretch right now. Look, the way wars have fought have totally changed in the last 3 years. 100 years of military technological change has happened in the last 3 years. I don't think it is much of a stretch right now to say that the most competent land force in the world right now very well could be the Ukrainian army. And we should watch and learn to our peril.
And one of the most competent defense industries laboring anywhere today is the Ukrainian defense industry. The innovation of drones, the manufacture of drones, I mean the rapid manufacture of drones in Ukraine. Ukraine can now make 4 million drones a year. And there are European defense companies looking into partnerships with Ukraine, both Rheinmetall from Germany, and now the maker of the NASAMS air defense system is talking with Ukraine about setting up a factory very quickly in order to make NASAM air defense missiles, something Ukraine desperately needs. So it's a great point of renewing Ukraine's defensive strength to have these missiles made in the country that most needs them.
Absolutely. And you know, little inside baseball, the NASAM systems are the national or Norwegian standard surface-to-air missile. So it was a joint project with the United States, but with the Norwegians doing quite a lot of heavy lifting. They are a first world nation technologically and in the very top rung of that. When the Norwegians say they're going to do something, they do it. And they often don't hold a press conference before they do it. And one of my favorite things is they shipped 250,000 law rockets to Ukraine and admitted it 6 months later. So, and listen, I have a great love for the nation of Norway. I was stationed there. I work with the FSK. A proud moment in my career to be in Norway. So get them, Norway.
And as I recall, Chuck, the NASAM system is one of the most effective air defense systems that's deployed in Ukraine. If I remember this number correctly, 96% effective against incoming drones and missiles?
Absolutely. And that is an unheard of kill rate. 96%. That is an unheard of kill rate. There was an Iris-T, there is an Iris-T battery in the defensive setups of Kyiv that has never missed a target yet. 100%. Now, that's not something that's going to stand because that's like a, batting 1,000, but it's pretty amazing.
And not even Ted Williams could do that.
Not even Ted Williams could do that. Come on.
So when we get to the maps, and we are about to go to the maps, we have more than half a dozen maps to look at. A lot of good news, frankly, coming from the zero line for Ukraine. Good news as a result of Ukrainian reconnaissance, knowing where the Russians are at any given time and where they're going, has resulted in some pretty decisive Ukrainian victories. Ukrainian planning, so that any counterattacks that Ukraine has launched, especially in Pokrovsk, very well thought out, with a single mission in mind that either deprives Russia of a powerful position from which they can launch attacks against Pokrovsk, or it provides Ukraine with a position from which they can further interdict Russian logistics and Russian troop deployments. That interdiction of Russian logistics, I think, is the other contributing factor to Ukraine's success. Have you seen the videos of donkeys and horses being used by the Russians, Chuck?
Yes, and recently somebody AI arted a donkey with a cope cage on him. There's the other sort of thing. We watch these videos and we don't ask the fundamental question. Russia invaded with all their own logistics. Then they started stealing white-colored Ukrainian civilian vehicles to use as scouts. Then they started stealing trucks. Then they ran out of trucks, and then they started using Chinese-made dune buggies, and then golf carts and motorcycles. Anyone see where I'm going here? And now it's donkeys. Why are you doing that, right? The de-evolution of Russian logistics. Look, folks, they are not winning this war, right? It's not the Ukrainians who are using donkeys. It's not the Ukrainians who are using golf carts. Don't forget that. Make the basic assessment that Alan and I, who study this stuff for a living, actually, make our assessment. Their logistics are in utter disarray. Utter disarray. Now, they have a program of daily quota system of attacks they have to carry out, and they are stretched to the maximum just to get the bullets and beans and Band-Aids to the point of attack. That donkey logistics system is not going to work when they are facing large-scale coordinated ground maneuver warfare launched by the Ukrainians. They're going to get their asses kicked. There are going to be surrenders numbering thousands of Russians at a time, which we already saw in the Kharkiv offensive. So things are not good for Russia. Were I the president, I shall never be, but I would be in no hurry to invite Mr. Lavrov to cool his porridge with me. Time's not right. Let's give you next summer. Let's see how you're doing next summer.
Yeah, I really agree. Look, it's not Ukraine that needs the ceasefire. Ukraine needs more opportunities to do what they're doing, and that is killing Russians and destroying the Russian war machine that's been deployed in Ukraine. The more they can do that, the better chance there is in 2025, Ukraine will liberate additional occupied territory. You know, wouldn't it be a wonderful thing to liberate Mariupol? Then we would learn what the Russians did to Mariupol. Then we would learn about the mass graves around Mariupol, visible from space, by the way, where at least 30,000 Ukrainian citizens, men, women, and children, have been dumped, buried. This is Russia attempting to conceal the most unbelievable atrocity and war crime that has been committed since the Second World War. That is what Mariupol is today. That's why I sincerely hope that Ukraine has the opportunity in 2025 to liberate as much occupied territory as possible, to free Ukrainian citizens living under Russian terror occupation today, because we will learn so much more about what the Russians have tried to do against Ukraine.
Right. Let's not forget which of the belligerents travel around with mobile crematoria. Right. Let's not forget who is turning the human detritus of this war into ash. Look, there is a right side of this and there is a wrong side. And it goes far beyond who started it or who invaded first. The history, if you haven't read Annie Applebaum's book on the Holodomor, look, you can read it in a weekend. Russia is fighting a genocidal war against Ukraine to obliterate their language, steal a generation of their children, destroy their culture, their literature, their art, their architecture. They want nothing left of Ukraine. That's never right. That is never right. This isn't a territorial dispute. This is a war of obliteration. Well, let's get on the right side of this, man. Look, it may come as a surprise to people, but look, there's no bigger peacenik, honestly, than a Navy SEAL. I've already seen the show, right? I've been to see the Elephant. War's a racket, but sometimes you have to stand up for what is right, or you get consumed by what is wrong. So be on the right side of this, folks.
And get on the phone to tell your member of Congress to get on the right side. And use what Chuck just said. Use what Chuck just said as a way to talk to your member of Congress. Use some of the information maybe you get on this show and other shows about Ukraine. Shows that are on the right side, because it's an evil war that Russia is fighting. We should be as far from that side of the war as possible, and yet we seem to be cozying up to the indicted war criminal responsible for invading Ukraine, and that's Vladimir Putin. It sickens me, frankly. Chuck?
I do not understand how the national security apparatus of the United States can apprehend that Russia is a friend to the nations of the world, that Russia will ever be a friend to the people of the United States or to the interests of the United States abroad, right? Hungary tries to throw off the Soviet yoke, they're invaded. Czechoslovakia tried to throw off the Soviet yoke, they were invaded. Afghanistan tried to throw off the Soviet yoke, they're invaded. I'm leaving out dozens of other examples here. Look, they're selling something that nobody wants, which is tyranny, right? And in the case of Ukraine, it isn't even tyranny. Look, Ukraine has Putin cannot have, as a next door neighbor, a prosperous, democratic, Western-looking republic that is advancing. He can't have that when 35% of his own people have to take up in the backyard, right? He cannot have that. It's an existential threat to Putin. And also, look, he started this. It was his idea. Shoigu, furniture salesman, and Gerasimov. Wake them up. They thought this was a great idea. Don't forget that this superpower has lost 1 million men trying to invade a regional weakling. Right. We don't want to drag NATO into this war. It's Russia that doesn't want NATO to get into this war. Because I think Finland and Sweden just by themselves could probably make a mess of what's left of the Russian army in Ukraine. But I digress.
I think they could. Putin doesn't want democracy on his doorstep in Ukraine. I guess he has enough democracies on his doorstep from the Baltics to Finland to Poland. And this is why Putin meddles in these countries' free elections, as he's doing in Romania, as he has done in Moldova, as he has done in Ukraine, as he attempted to do in Germany, as a matter of fact. Putin can't stand having a democracy on his doorstep. That's the other reason for his invasion of Ukraine. A lot of facts from the Zero Line. That's where we are headed right now, starting with the 25 February and 27 February maps in Kupiansk. And this is where action around Petropavlivka, pretty much in the center of your maps, Chuck. This high ground position for Ukraine, I assume, helped them achieve a pretty devastating victory over an armored Russian column moving towards Kupiansk.
Yeah, this is information that folks I get from Vijesti. Please follow him. His information comes hours before it breaks on social media. He will micro focus on different points around the battlefield. He has never been wrong. He is always first with his information, good or bad, and has never been wrong. Please do give him a follow. And anyway, so this Kupiansk map was predicated on Vijesti's information there at Petropavlivka, which is right here in the center of the map here. We have another case of Ukrainian drones being used to destroy an oncoming Russian column. I could just have this. I just had the Mac AI clone my voice recently, and I should just type this in because we say it again and again. This was another rectilinear in-column attack by the Russians, carried out in broad daylight, creeping along with only one of their vehicles able to return fire. At least 6 Russian armored vehicles were destroyed, 2 of the main battle tanks. 35 Russian troops reported killed. Believe me, that is a very conservative estimate predicated on the number of people inside in a regular crew situation for these vehicles. This is an almost typical Russian attack. Every day that they make contact, they lose between 35 and 85% of their forces, right? In a very rare occasion, they'll lose less than 35%, and in a very rare occasion, not very rare, but occasionally, they'll lose 100%. This isn't winning, right? They are no closer to taking Kupiansk than they have been for the last 2 years. And when you look, one of the answers is you look to the right portion of this map, and you see there's only a couple of roads that lead into Petropavlivka and that battle area. You see that open terrain, folks, and it is death. Death and dragons be there. So it's very difficult for Russia with their donkeys to get their ammunition and their fuel up to the 0 line where they get to the jumping off point and they consolidate. That tactical information, Ukrainians have it in real time. And Ukraine is able to get to the point of defense and be ready when the Russians show up. And that's the way the rest of this war is going to go, just like Kupiansk.
It seems evident to me, is one of the keys of Ukraine's success around Kupiansk, and that is reconnaissance, just exactly as you say, Chuck, knowing where the Russians are, where they intend to go, and preparing to meet them. In this case, with drones, drones got the job done here. You didn't need the Ukrainian troops on the heights of Petropavlivka to do much other, probably, than guide the drones to their targets.
Yep, absolutely. And here's a good training aid here. There is no tank on the battlefield that could sustain a hit by this much plastic explosive, including the recessed bottom here. I'm absolutely serious. No tank in the world could stand up to this. And that's what the Ukrainian drones deliver, right? And remember the upside down wedding cake. There are longer endurance drones who direct mid-endurance drones, who direct first-person drones in a networked control, right? There again, a while back, there was the Russians were going on and on about their new fiber optic guided drones that could not be stopped. They of course trail a wire, which actually can be very conspicuous in certain wavelengths of light, and that leads right back to the guy pushing the buttons. So you kill the archer and not the arrow.
You know, I saw reports about that just the other day, Chuck, saying that the fiber optic cable glistened in the sunlight. It's a lot like seeing a spider's web glisten in the sunlight in August or early September, when spiders are on the move through the air, actually. That's at least what I thought of when I read that report. The other way that Ukraine is locating drones is with microphones that pick up the noise of especially low-flying drones over the battlefield. So Ukrainian innovation, once again, at work.
Absolutely. And in many big cities in the United States, they've also got microphones around. They are used to triangulate the sound of gunfire. The audio engineering is, it's pretty easy to understand. The sound is moving at the speed of sound, which is a known. Absolutely, you can know it down to the 1,000th of mile per hour in atmospheric pressure, temperature, etc. So again, Ukrainian innovation, and I love saying this because I want it to hurt. Ukraine was always the brains of the Soviet Union. They were the brains. They built the nuclear reactors, the spaceships, the airplanes, the ships, the capital ships, the missiles, the metallurgy. All of it came out of Ukraine, which is why Putin wants so desperately to erase it.
Yep. He's not going to succeed around Kupiansk, which we will return to in the next few days, I'm sure. The other thing that is apparent on the battlefield, whether you're looking in Kupiansk or in Kreminna or Pokrovsk, is Ukrainian success with drone-on-drone warfare. Again, a really important development for Ukraine. I think almost as important as Ukraine's ability now to bring down Russian glide bombs. Ukraine's ability to bring down Russian reconnaissance drones, attack drones with drone-on-drone combat in the air. I guess it goes back to the days of the Red Baron in World War I, right? Except these are unmanned.
It really does, and ramming attacks during the early combat aviation in World War I, there were even units that had armored propellers. So this was a legit means by which to bring down your adversary. And we see it again. And, it's encouraging to see those video clips where you will literally go through the entire inventory of Russian reconnaissance drones, one after another. And there are about 15 or 16 different ones they use in combat. And again, it's Ukraine getting there, locating, detect, locate, track, interdict. And that loop, we can see every one of these successful intercepts. There are no accidental encounters in the sky, right? The pilots will tell you big sky, little airplane. So you're not really going to hit anything else. These are intercepts, and Ukraine's making them happen.
We're next going to go to Kreminna. There are 3 maps we have to look at from Kreminna, Chuck, so that we can watch the situation around Nevsky, which is where Russia initiated this salient to the west of the Zarabets River. So we have maps from February 25th, February 27th, and February 28th. Russia has attempted to enlarge this salient, but not very successfully. And we have 3 maps to take a look at that.
Yeah, we've been talking about this Russian salient up there, and we've talked previously about Ukraine is kind of they will trade dirt for time, and this is a case where they've allowed the Russians actually to advance to the west of the Zarabets River. I'm afraid I'm going to have to look very closely at it's the 0526 highway, which is an O series road, farm market road, not much of a road at all. And this is the most substantial Russian progress in the last 2.5, 3 years. They've actually managed to get, I'd say, 4.5, maybe 5 kilometers, which is about 3 miles west of the Zerbets. But Ukraine has allowed the Russians to advance over a flat sort of piece of ground. And we've talked about this before. You can see that this ground that the Russians have been allowed to take is overseen by a series of bluffs. This allows not only Ukraine to shoot down on the bad guys, but also to fire in defilade, meaning they get their indirect fire weapons behind a hill. That's war college talk for just shooting over the hill. As Alan pointed out, the little gap between the north end of the Zerbets Reservoir and the hamlet of Nevsky, that is everything that the Russians want to feed into that salient, coming or going, goes through a gap that is slightly less than a kilometer wide. So that's the toll right there. If the Russians are coming in, they got to pay the toll. If they're going to go out, they got to pay the toll. So were I a local Russian commander and were I able to speak the truth, neither of those things is ever going to happen. I would have to say, look, this is an absolute waste of time, resources, manpower, and equipment. But the Russians are more than happy to hold on to it and be punished for it. So again, and this is in an area where Russia outnumbers the Ukrainian defenders probably 10-1. I think they've outnumbered them at some point 20-1 in this area. If this is all Ukraine has given up, it's very well done. And this map, with the exception of this salient, has really not changed very much in the 3 years that Alan and I have been looking at it. There is a little atrocity to report here as well. If you look in the city of Liman, you will see a red battle icon indicating drone. 2 Ukrainian civilians apparently returning from a market as they had groceries strewn around them, dead on their bicycles because they were murdered by a Russian drone operator. These were civilians, non-combatants, coming back from the market. Think of that. That is what Russia does with its resources. That's what it does. They weren't looking for a tank, a Ukrainian tank or an artillery piece or a mortar or a platoon of Ukrainian infantry. They were looking for 2 people coming back from a freaking grocery store.
The Russians call this the human safari, and it's a human safari that Russian drone operators pursue in Kherson, in Kharkiv, and now down here in Liman. I don't care, Chuck. It's no different than a Nazi soldier in Warsaw during the Second World War picking off a civilian on the street. No different from that. It's just outright murder.
No different. No different than a guard in a Nazi death camp shooting into the crowd. No different. This wasn't an act of war. This isn't covered by any sort of custom of war, right of war. This is simply murder. It's what it is. I'm not looking to make light of this or find good in it, but I will say this. There is an incredible amount of frustration among the Russian troops that this resource that could have killed a tank, right? It could have done something. They have to strike out at what they can strike out at. They have precision strike munitions. They can't find legitimate military targets, so an apartment building will do. Whoever was flying this drone couldn't find a military target, so 2 people on the freaking way home from the grocery store, well, that was good enough for him, right? That's the enemy, right? That is the enemy. And an enemy that rotten to the core, and they are rotten to the core, they don't triumph in war. History shows us They don't. They can ascend in war. Look at the downfall of Nazi Germany, right? Not one stone left upon another. You know, you don't have to believe in the Lord, folks, but I believe in karma.
Yeah. Not one stone left upon another in Berlin. Maybe there won't be one stone left upon another when Ukraine is victorious in this war. And I don't necessarily refer to physical destruction inside Russia, but I certainly refer to historical destruction of Russia's imperial reason for existence. It's this Russian imperialism that needs to be destroyed, and it's likely only to be destroyed when Russia finally is defeated in its last imperial war. And that's another reason why Ukraine needs to win. So this can be the last imperial war that Russia ever has the opportunity to fight, ever has the backing of its people to fight. They have to give up this fever dream of imperialism. Let them wake up in Ukraine and let the United States help Ukraine as much as Europe is helping Ukraine. We might get to that comparison as we close the show out, Chuck, but that will only come after many, many more maps.
Yeah. And I just want to tell you folks, look, Russia is being defeated, right? These gains, and here we are at a perfect example, this Zarabets River salient. The gains are of no military utility, right? They're not. You've got an enemy that's trying to get donkeys to the front. Okay, that isn't what winning looks like. Okay, that isn't what winning looks like. Having 3 paratroopers talking, holding a video conference from a hospital, saying they don't get adequate medical care, they're not well, they're being shipped back to the front, they don't get food, they don't get water, they don't get mail, their command doesn't listen to them, they know these assaults are fruitless. That's not what winning looks like. When your paratroopers talk like that, try to imagine a United States paratrooper sitting there from your 101st Screaming Eagles saying stuff like that, right? One of your best and brightest saying stuff like that. Russia's getting defeated, and we're going to prove it. We got more maps.
And we're going to stop on the way to Pokrovsk in Chasiv Yar. And Russia is being defeated. You know, the number of engagements on the zero line yo-yo up and down. You know, sometimes in the past 90 days, over 200 engagements, with the majority of those coming in Pokrovsk. Now, half that, just 110 engagements overnight, with about a third of those engagements coming in Pokrovsk. But if you look at the trend line over those 90 days, you will see Russian attacks going down, down, down. The average number of Russian attacks now down under 130 in 7-day averages. So this is the trend line to watch. It's the trend line that gives me hope that Russian forces are petering out, that they are approaching culmination on a number of points on the zero line, maybe in Pokrovsk, maybe around Chasiv Yar as well, Chuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And the number of attacks go up and down, of course. But Russian casualty numbers have crept up. I can remember when they were losing 200 people a day, then 3, then 400, then 500. Now the number is generally above 1,000.
Yep.
And sometimes very close to 2,000 and occasionally 2,000. So that math I keep blasting out, that they lose between 35 and 80% of their troops in every contact, it still holds when we look at daily numbers of reported contact and losses. Also, the estimation of those losses, as we saw in Kupiansk, Ukraine claimed 35 Russian soldiers killed out of 8 armored vehicles. That's very conservative. Those were just people. You take the crew number and the vehicle, and Russian losses are often. Look, Russia does everything they can to hide their losses. We know they don't report their dead to Moscow. Sometimes this is done for benevolent purposes, so that a fallen soldier, his pay and allowances will still go to his family. Sometimes it's for nefarious reasons that the Russians don't want to report their failures. But Russian casualties are, we see the tip of the iceberg in the estimations. I haven't been ever tempted to blow it up to some number that I thought it was. We're operating with, numbers that are quantifiable, and Ragnar's numbers are really good. Well, we can give him a pitch too, I think, Alan, right now, should we?
Yeah, we should. This is Ragnar Gudmundsson from Iceland. He has kept track of losses in this war since 3 years ago. He's kept track of the number of battle engagements, airstrikes, artillery strikes, tank losses. He uses Ministry of Defense information, as well as some verifiable information from another statistician like Andrew Perpetua. You can really trust Ragnar's dashboard. It's actually the first thing I do almost every day, Chuck. I take a look at Ragnar's dashboard to see what the changes have been overnight. And it helps me understand the scope and scale of the war. Go take a look, follow Ragnar Gudmundsson, and wake up every day and take a look at his dashboard. Some days are surprising. Some days confirm assumptions and hopes that you have about Ukraine's success in defending itself. If you look at the Ragnar Gudmundsson dashboard on February 25th, which is the date of this map from the Bakhmut axis, you will see something about the number of Russian airstrikes in that day. What strikes me here, Chuck, this is a real display of Russian air power from Kramatorsk to Druzhkivka down to Konstantinivka, at glide bombs aimed at civilian targets in these frontline cities.
Yeah, so you're looking at air power directed 20, 30, 40 kilometers from the zero line. We know what they're aiming at. This is what they are aiming at. Here it is writ large. We see both numbers and targets. So, we're not just talking out of our hats here. This shows what is going on. Dealing with Chasiv Yar itself, this was one of those days. I will often try to do a battle plot when I don't have a lot of contact points, because it allows everybody to see where the zero line is as best as we can determine. As we spoke a long time ago during the Battle of Bakhmut, we pointed out that taking Bakhmut is not going to help you very much, because in order to advance either on the M03 or the H32, either one of those advances would not be mutually supporting, because they diverge. We also pointed out that no advance from Bakhmut area would be possible until Chasiv Yar was subdued. This was 2.5 years ago. Now, Chasiv Yar has lost a little terrain, but it still remains a Ukrainian bastion. And just because it is there, it is per force a threat to any Russian movement, either to the northwest or to the southwest. So the Battle of Bakhmut was always about Chasiv Yar. It's still about Chasiv Yar, and Chasiv Yar is still holding. And we talk about that petulance, that frustration, that viciousness of the Russian targeteers. Look at all those red airstrikes. Ask yourself why they aren't directed against Chasiv Yar. And you have a pretty good answer, because that isn't where the civilians are, and that isn't who Russia wants to kill. They want to kill civilians.
Well, that was the very question at the top of my mind, Chuck. And we've seen video from Kramatorsk, we've seen video from Kostiantynivka of the civilian structures struck by these Russian glide bombs, in some cases high-rise or medium-rise civilian apartment blocks. In other cases, individual farmhouses. And so my guess is that the glide bomb that destroyed a farmhouse in Kramatorsk is one of these glide bombs that Ukraine has successfully countered and sent off course. I mean, why would you destroy a farmer's home? What is the point of that?
Not much point to it at all. And we deal with this every day. We see the examples of it every day. There is some inference here from me, but not much. The Russians don't have good tactical intelligence. They don't exactly know where the Ukrainians are. They don't know where their depots are. They don't know where their fueling stations are. They don't exactly know where the Ukrainian forces are. What Russia has to do every day is sort of reconnaissance by fire. They put together a column and they send it out, and they watch it gets its ass kicked, and they go, "Oh, that's where the Ukrainians are." And the obverse of the coin is Ukraine knows almost everything about what Russia is going to do. They know almost everything about where they are. They know almost everything about how they are going to do something, these rectilinear daylight attacks, and they are always there waiting for them. So you can think of it this way. Ukraine with its interior lines, Ukraine is inside the house. The Russians are outside the house. Ukraine listens and watches, and they know, okay, they're going to attack the back door. They're going to attack the front door. They're going to attack the sliding glass door. Knowing that in time allows Ukraine to take a smaller force and concentrate it at the point of contact. They don't have to be strong everywhere. They have to be strong at the point of contact. That's efficiency, right? That's a good use of resources. That is never going to change. That is why Ukraine, with a smaller force, with a less well-equipped force, is taking on a larger enemy and frankly defeating them, right? It's good leadership, it's good intelligence, it's the simple guts and valor of the Ukrainian soldiers and their will to fight. That means everything.
Yeah, it does mean everything. And Ukrainians have a reason to fight. They're protecting their loved ones, their families, their homes, and their future, as well as fighting for their freedom and for their democracy. And quite frankly, I feel that Ukraine is fighting for my democracy as well. And I wish that my democracy, we got on the right side of this fight. The other thing, just one last comment about the Chasiv Yar Bakhmut map of 25 February. If you want to see a reason why Ukraine needs more air defense here, more than 1,100 days into this war, take a look at this Bakhmut map. These are frontline cities that are pretty obviously wide open to Russian air attack. And it is because Ukraine lacks sufficient air defense to deploy around its major cities, protect residents in Kyiv, Odessa, Kharkiv, as far west as Lviv, but they don't have sufficient air defense or the proper mix of air defense to bring to the front line to protect frontline cities like Kostyantynivka and Kramatorsk.
Absolutely. And these attacks will typically take place maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes after dawn. The Russian attack aircraft are coming out of the sun. They have the sun behind them, which has a diminishing effect on the effectiveness of infrared air defense. But Alan is right. If there were 3 or 4 or 5 multi-battery NASAMS systems here in this area, if they could be spared, and they cannot be, this wouldn't happen. The other thing is, it's not only that the NASAM system can take out the airplane, it can also take out a lumbering 2-ton Russian glide bomb on a predictable parabolic course. So there's a lot to be said here. And again, we have been banging on it, Alan. Air defense, air defense, air defense, air defense. Bang on it too, folks. Every time you see a strike icon on a Ukrainian city, tell yourself that could have been prevented.
Exactly. And this is exactly why the partnership that's been developed and is going to be developed very quickly to produce NASAM air defense missiles, in particular, inside Ukraine. That's why that's so important. Ukraine, so efficient in its defense industry, and obviously so determined to keep it running and to expand it, to build everything Ukraine needs to defend itself, because Ukraine can't rely on the United States any longer. That has become obvious.
Yeah, it's, here's another thing I want people to grasp as well. 45% of the Russian economy is supporting 95% of their military in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Okay, so almost half of the economy is supporting almost 100% of their military in its effort in Ukraine. Did I mention the donkeys? Did I mention the golf carts? Okay, am I mentioning any of that? Am I mentioning the 35 to 85% kill ratio on every one of their attacks? It's unsustainable. Russia can't win this war, right? Go back to 1970 and the Pentagon Papers. The United States realized in 1969, 1970 that the war was unwinnable in Vietnam. The United States had a much more powerful army, but they had the wrong tool for the job. They didn't have the right kind of army. Russia doesn't have the right kind of army anymore, although they started with exactly the kind of army that should have been able to subdue this regional thorn in their side. So again, I just want people, predicated on this. Look, Russia is not going to start World War III, Mr. President. It's not going to happen, right? There isn't going to be a nuclear exchange. That just isn't going to happen. And Russia is not going to defeat Ukraine. Russia is never going to get to the Dnipro River. It isn't going to happen. And perhaps, Mr. President, you might get impeached a second time, and it might carry in the Senate.
That would be the third time, Chuck, but
that would be the third time. I'm sorry. So it could be a charm.
That's
he's
right.
losing his base. He's losing his base as well, because 64% of the American people, that makes it a landslide, are in favor of Ukraine.
Yeah.
Right? They don't want to see Ukraine get shivved. And they don't want to see the kind of spectacle that happened in the Oval Office today. While we've been on, my messages are going off the roof, asking me if I had seen the nauseating, the disgusting, every adjective you could think. Did I see what happened in the Oval Office? Let's not forget what happened in the Oval Office.
Well, I just cannot imagine the self-control that President Zelensky needs to exercise, especially in front of the president and vice president, who are exercising no self-control whatsoever, who have failed to command the facts about Ukraine and are really confronting Zelensky with Putin's talking points and disinformation. It is sickening. It's embarrassing for the United States. Look, it was only 11 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but after a meeting like that, I can imagine Zelensky's heart rate elevated, his blood pressure rising, and going to the nearest bar and saying, "My God, give me a drink," because that's what I need after a meeting like that.
I could say that, and I hope. Particularly disappointing to me was the conduct of the vice president. You know, go home and play that video for your kids.
Yeah.
Go home and show them, look what Daddy did at work today.
Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah, that's what I meant about sycophantic. Yeah, you wanted it, buddy. You got it, and you showed me that you really deserve the job you've taken.
Yeah. Well, Zelensky could have pulled out Chuck's maps from Pokrovsk from February 25th and today, February 28th, and said to Trump and Zelensky, let me show you the hottest spot on the zero line where Ukraine is successfully fighting back against Russian forces. Let me show you evidence of Ukraine defeating Russia. You say Ukraine doesn't have any cards to play, that we can't win. First of all, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, why don't you come to Ukraine? Every other leader from Europe has come to Kyiv. Joe Biden visited Kyiv. President Zelensky is going to the front line as often as he possibly can to visit Ukrainian troops and to give them confidence, just as General Syrskyi is doing as well. But, Donald Trump doesn't have the courage to leave the Lincoln bedroom, does he?
Well, here's another thing that President Zelensky can say at the conference table. Here's a map of Pokrovsk. Here's what I'm doing. How would your forces be doing without air superiority, without air defense parity? How would your forces be doing outnumbered 10, 15, 20 to 1 in number of artillery tubes? I don't know. Just stop me if you think the United States Army could fight under these conditions. Look, I was a professional naval officer. I've been on joint staffs. The answer is hell no. Hell no. Like I said, I have a lot of combat experience. No one ever dropped a bomb on me from an airplane in my entire life. I never had to worry about that. Ukraine has to worry about it every single day. So I am sorry that his visit got turned into such a spectacle, but I truly admire the man who could get through it. And I only wish I was at the Hudson Institute this afternoon so I could stand on my chair and cheer for this guy. And I would too.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to cheer by watching him. I wish I was in Washington today. I really do. And Chuck is referring to the appearance that President Zelensky will be making later today, 4 p.m. Eastern time at the Hudson Institute. And I am certain he will get a standing ovation, not only for his performance today, which, it was solid. When I watched the few clips I watched this morning, I thought to myself, I'm watching the leader of the free world give an example of leadership today. His name is Volodymyr Zelensky. That's what I thought when I was watching the clips.
And I thought this. I thought I was looking at two high school bullies jumping a little guy in a hallway.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I thought. Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, not a good look. Not a good look. And you shave your own face tomorrow morning. And honestly, Mr. Vance, why don't you show that tape to your kids?
Yeah.
Really. Talk to them about bullying at school. Just show them that. Because you're a peach. You're a peach.
Look, that is exactly the right metaphor, or honestly, it's the right parallel, Chuck. Two bullies ambushing a kid in the school hallway. It's exactly right. That this was an ambush in the Oval Office, and that's what the headline should be in the newspapers. Trump Vance ambush Zelensky in Oval Office press coverage. But
history is going to treat the president of Ukraine very well.
Yeah, it will. And I do hope that President Zelensky not only has a long life and a long time of leadership of Ukraine, but is able to convey to the rest of us the lessons that he learned in the course of his leadership of Ukraine through this war. Franklin Delano Roosevelt didn't live long enough to write those memoirs because Roosevelt, as much as Churchill, but I think Roosevelt even more, learned valuable lessons of leadership and really was the primary reason that the United States benefited from civilian leadership during the Second World War. You can regard either President Lincoln or President Roosevelt as the greatest wartime leaders America has ever had. What America needs right now is another wartime leader, one equal to Zelensky. Wouldn't it be great to have an American wartime leader like Roosevelt and his counterpart, Winston Churchill, fighting together, understanding why they're on the same team, and conveying to the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth around the world, conveying to the people in America why we fight. That's what President Zelensky does every single day.
I'm glad you brought up two of America's greatest presidents and arguably the greatest wartime leader in history, in modern history, Churchill. Try to imagine this, folks. I want this little thought to go in first. Try to forget this. Could you imagine Lincoln doing anything like this? Roosevelt, Churchill, inviting an ally in, a needful ally, and treating them like that? To what end? What is it about that encounter that made the President of the United States feel better about himself? I think this is going to blow back politically. This was an obscene and puerile and completely unnecessary little spectacle. Anyway, we'll move on here a little bit. We try to stay out of the domestic politics as much as possible, and I will try to do that, folks.
It's getting harder and harder to do, and there's every reason not to do it, Chuck. Every reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go back to the map in Pokrovsk for a couple of reasons. A spectacular explosion in Seladove. Again, Ukrainian reconnaissance, knowing where Russia has put its supply. Where does the Russian logistic end come to a line? Right there.
That very likely in Seladove is a center of gravity for Russian logistics. Certainly, target for today in Seladove was what we definitely call a sympathetic target. This was a depot servicing Russia's TOS-1, a flamethrower, heavy flamethrower system, a barbarous weapon that has no analog in the West. It shoots rockets into the air that then disperse burning chunks of thermite over a wide an area as possible. There is no analogous weapon in the NATO arsenal. There never will be. It's just designed to destroy as many things as possible. Ukraine was able to find out where these shells are being stored, where these systems are being reloaded. This is a good 20 kilometers from the zero line.
Yeah.
So we're looking 12 miles deep. This could have been a hammer bomb, AASM French bomb. This could have been it could have been a drone. We don't know exactly what hit it, but we do know that once this target started to burn, it put on quite a show. And the Russians discovered what it was like to have thermite falling from the sky on them. And it just went on for about 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. Spectacular shot, and hats off.
So again, Russian failure to conceal its logistical supply line and Ukraine's ability to use reconnaissance and information to identify critical targets like that thermobaric weapons depot in Seladove. So if you take a look at these two maps from Pokrovsk, one from February 25th, one from February 28th, you will see Ukrainian counterattacks just about everywhere, especially successful Ukraine counterattacking south of Pokrovsk, west of Pokrovsk in Kuteri. I think that Ukraine has occupied Kuteri.
Yeah, that is definitely going back and forth. There is not much left of Kuteri proper. It is pretty well beaten down. It's always been sort of a little town around a loop of railroad siding. I'm just getting the map so I can blow it up here. That little battle there, again, it's this. The latest plotting of the zero line puts Kuteri in the hands of Ukraine. The proximity of the Russian airstrikes there along the M30 highway, that would be a Russian airstrike, tactical. So that is likely a close air support strike. So if you are looking at Pokrovsk, and this is, I'm operating off the 28 Feb map, which is today, 2 airstrikes in Pokrovsk, likely targeting apartment buildings. But the other 2 airstrikes to the south and west of Pokrovsk, when an airstrike is in close proximity to a battle icon, you can assume that that is generally a close air support mission, meaning troops in contact on the ground call for air support or, air delivered weapons to address proximate targets. There are a couple places on the map, and then going to the east of Pokrovsk, you can see there's a Russian airstrike in the middle, maybe 4 kilometers, 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the zero line. The Russians aren't dropping airstrikes on their own territory because bombs fall off their wings, although that does happen. This particular area northwest of Mylokolavka, it has been a spot. There is a Ukrainian lodgment here. Russia has engaged in airstrikes against this place for a while. You can look above it. That battle icon is actually also south of the line of contact. So when you see an isolated Russian airstrike icon, that is always going to be indicative, and you can take it to the bank that there are Ukrainian troops in contact at that location. And no mean feat, right? So we talk about logistics, etc. You can put a patrol in, it can conduct a raid, which means it goes in and comes out, but this target keeps getting hit. So I haven't changed the zero line, but you might want to think about it.
It's also possible to go back in Chuck's timeline and take a look at Pokrovsk maps, especially Pokrovsk maps that are blown up and showing the urban territory of Pokrovsk, the neighborhoods of Pershe Trevina to the south of Pokrovsk, looking all the way down to Pashani to the south of Pokrovsk. Ukraine has successfully strengthened the defense around Pokrovsk. Ukraine has rolled back Russian offensive lines here. And again, I would encourage you to go back in time and look at what Ukraine is doing. I continue to believe that Pokrovsk will be a place on the zero line where Ukraine can deliver a counterattack, a punch in the face that will send Russian forces backwards into retreat, and I hope into disarray.
Yeah, and this is something that Ukraine could do, and the could part of the equation is if it had a reliable partner, if it could count on fuel, ammunition, vehicles, everything it takes. Because, again, Ukraine has made the best that it can out of the existing situation. They don't have a reliable enough partner to execute large combined arms maneuver warfare. They don't. So they are thrown onto the defensive, where they are able to make the most of the opportunities presented by these piecemeal, sporadic, separated Russian attacks. So, and again, on this particular map, we're looking at the whole Pokrovsk area. I've got another series of maps that are just Pokrovsk City. I'll be putting those up tomorrow. I wanted to show the big picture as much as possible here. But I will say this. So looking at the big blow up of the map, you can see all these battle icons, blue battle icons everywhere. You might want to ask yourself, were I a Russian commander, instead of launching whatever this probably is, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 different attacks that are miles apart, why wouldn't I want to muster all my forces together and make a thrust at Pokrovsk? Why wouldn't I want to do that? You can't.
Yeah.
They can't. They don't even dare brief 300 people at a time. They don't even dare get those people together because there could be a mutiny right there, right? Those 300 guys could go fuck that. Pardon my French. That fuck is actually the word for seal in French, if you didn't know that, which is what I just said. There have been colonels who have been torn to pieces at briefings. Their men have risen up en masse and killed them. Russia will never take Pokrovsk with 14 or 15 different attacks to the south, to the west, to the east. They're not going to take it. Okay, and looking south here, we report bad news as good news. Under the call out that says key developments, there of course is Kharkov and the reservoir. You can see that now the Ukrainian salient that went to Kharkov and south has been Ukraine has shortened its defensive lines. What we've seen there was the Ukraine executing the hardest thing to do in warfare. They disengaged from the Russians, and in an orderly fashion, losing none of their materiel, vehicles, or weapons. They pulled out of that salient, right? Again, trading dirt for time. Something that the Russians have proven they cannot do. Retrograde maneuvers for the Russians, they fall apart. They lose tens of kilometers at a time. So again, these are just reporting things from the battlefield, folks. Report what we see. Pokrovsk has been the center of gravity of Russian efforts in the east, right up there with Bakhmut, and they still have not taken it. And I don't think they're going to.
No, I don't think they're going to. And as I say, I still think that we're going to see a Ukrainian success here that will cheer our hearts. It would have been great if such a success could have happened at the same time Zelensky was meeting in the Oval Office. But I want to make the same point about Pokrovsk that I made about Kremna. If only Ukraine had the air defense to deploy to the battle line. Now, Ukraine has saturated the air around Pokrovsk with drones. That is sufficient to interdict Russian logistics, to keep the heads of Russian infantry down and to stop their advance. But it's not sufficient to stop Russian airstrikes. For that, you need NASAMS, you need the Gepard system deployed on the zero line, and Ukraine has insufficient air defense to bring forward to the zero line. Yeah, it would be at risk. There's no question about that. But it would protect the Ukrainian assets on the zero line that you need to protect to prepare for a forceful counterattack.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in these, I'm so glad you brought this up, Ellen. In this map, and you see these airstrikes around Pokrovsk, all of these arguably, with the exception of the two hits on the city itself, these are close air support missions. NATO has an overabundance of surplus Hawk missile systems. This is a system that was, like Billy Idol. It was big in the 80s, but it still works. And it is a system that you can tow behind a Jeep, all of its components, its sensors, its batteries, its reload. I mean, this is all four-wheel drive towable stuff. And this is exactly what the Hawk system was used for. I mean, it's you put it up at the front, and it's modular pieces. You spread those over the battlefield so they're not committing fratricide if they're hit. And it isn't the greatest anti-air system in the whole world, but it'll still shoot down a careless pilot. So we have also been saying that, because Ukraine has chosen to prioritize civilian life over military expediency. Those systems are defending cities rather than, and in places like in systems like the Gepard and the Hawk are designed to be used in a tactical level here, right? Short range air defense right here in a situation exactly like this. So just one more thing that on the Christmas list that Ukraine needs desperately. And what's so pathetic, folks, is we've got those. We have hundreds and hundreds of Hawk missile systems. We've got them. They're no longer our frontline service weapon. We've got them to give.
They should have been given a year ago. They should have been given 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
They should have been given when President Zelensky first pleaded for more air defense. This is something President Zelensky has pleaded for 3 years of this war. More air defense, more air defense, more air defense. Obviously, it hasn't gotten to Ukraine, even though it's available from a number of sources, including the United States. We're going to keep our eyes on Pokrovsk. I'm going to keep hoping that we have news of a Ukrainian breakthrough of some kind here in Pokrovsk. I know that it's probably unreasonable of me, Chuck, to hope for such a breakthrough, such an obvious Ukrainian victory on the zero line, just to prove to the doubters out there, the naysayers out there, unfortunately numbering Trump and Vance among them, that Ukraine is winning this war, that Russia cannot, and that Russian defeat, Ukrainian victory, is over the horizon, around the corner, whatever phrase you want to use, but we are going to see it soon in 2025.
We are. And, and again, we'll go from tactics here to geopolitics for a while. Put up a post a little earlier today, and it showed the nation of Ukraine superimposed on the sort of east coast of the United States. And it shows essentially what Ukraine has and what Putin wants, which is basically a chunk of territory that goes from New York City to Washington, D.C., hooks around to Norfolk, Virginia, and then down to Raleigh, North Carolina. Keep this in mind. That is the chunk of territory, give or take, a little less actually than Russia occupies. And this is probably what Putin wants. Something's going to have to give, because President Trump just signed a mineral deal, and those minerals that he wants are basically in the striped area of that little chunk of territory that Russia occupies. So something's going to have to give here. I don't really know how I feel about helping somebody put out the fire in their home, but signing over their furniture first before I go to help them. And if that's putting too fine a point on it, maybe in the comments below you can tell me what you think about that. Look, Russia is not up to good here. And this battle is being fought in Europe already, because Ukraine is Europe.
Yeah. And that's not putting too fine a point on it for me, Chuck. Again, it's exactly the parallel I think I would use. I'm not going to watch my neighbor's house burn and say, yeah, I'll turn on my hose here to put out, help you put out that fire. But you know what? I love that that car in your garage. Want to trade for it? And I'll turn on my garden hose to help you before the fire department gets here.
Yeah,
and by the way, would the fire department arrive and say, hey, can I have that grandfather clock I just noticed in the stairwell going up to the second floor? We'll finish, putting out the fire here. It's embarrassing, Chuck. It is embarrassing.
Yeah, it is embarrassing. It's conduct unbecoming, and frankly, I think it's a little un-American, actually.
It's very un-American. Someone ought to school Trump and Vance on the lend-lease that Russia, the Soviet Union, never repaid the United States from the Second World War, but the United Kingdom paid back every single penny of the Lend-Lease program, and program that helped save England in its darkest hour. There's I talked earlier in this show, I forget myself, as if we're live. We're not live. We're recording on YouTube. Someday we are going to be live here on YouTube. It just means a question and answer opportunity. So I've been talking as if folks will hear me say, join the Hudson Institute broadcast in an hour's time now from my time zone. In other words, when you see this show of indications and warnings, go retrieve the video of Zelensky talking at the Hudson Institute and listen to it, but also retrieve the videos of the meeting in the Oval Office today with Trump, Vance, and Zelensky, and tell me who is behaving as if they're the leader of the free world. To me, it's Volodymyr Zelensky.
Yeah. And again, folks, we have scrupulously tried to avoid domestic United States policy. I comment only on and criticize the actions of the commander in chief. That's the only thing I'm qualified to comment on. I am not a political person. But it's hard to see any good in that. It really is. I only thank God there wasn't a 200-yard long office like Adolf Hitler had, so there'd be film of Zelensky marching all by himself across 200 yards of carpet. And again, I'm sure that if there were some sort of big space like that, it might have been used today to that purpose. But take a look at that guy by himself up against two people who lied in wait for him, right? And his greatest moment will come in an hour. You can watch what he does at the Hudson Institute, and that will be the mark of the man.
That's what Chuck and I are going to do. That's one of the reasons we're recording this show in the time of day we are. And Chuck's point about the Oval Office is well taken. It's a very small room. Anyone who's listening who's never been to Washington, D.C., who's never been on a tour of the White House, sometimes you can get a tour of the Oval Office and you will see what a cozy space it is. So folks listening, wherever you're listening from, visit Washington, D.C. sometime, see if you can get a tour of the White House, but certainly go to the Capitol building as well. Many years ago, had the opportunity to work in Washington, D.C. I regard the Capitol building as the people's house, and every time there is a threat on the Capitol building, my heart breaks. I don't care if the threat came on 9/11 or if it came on January 6th. To me, the space of the United States Capitol is the heart of the United States. It's a heroic space. Good and bad happens in the U.S. Capitol in history when you read it and you understand it, but you cannot work there without having that space capture your heart and your mind and making you into an American patriot. That is usually what work in Washington means. If you're a young American, most of the workers in Washington, D.C. are young. They're in college, just out of college, in their 20s, in their early 30s or something like that. I have some real questions about the patriotism of young people in the Trump administration at the moment. I think they need more information. I think they need to read more history. And they need to ask some more questions about what the United States is doing as an ally of Ukraine. So, folks listening to indications and warnings here, give us a like, subscribe to indications and warnings, share indications and warnings among your friends or among your enemies. Some of them will become our friends, some of them will become our enemies. But here on day 1101, February 28, 2025, the day that President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Washington, D.C. and met with President Trump and Vice President Vance. Today is the day that Volodymyr Zelensky once again displayed He is the leader of the free world. Chuck?
Definitely saw that. I think his speech at Hudson will be a triumph. I fully expect it will. And I just want to echo what Alan was just saying. Alan spent a lot of his time working in Washington. I have as well on the military and security and intelligence side. And it just hit me as you said it, Alan. Everybody working there was working together, Democrat, Republican, and in the military, that has absolutely no bearing and no one wants to hear it, so don't bring it up, but all working together.
Yeah.
And none of us getting rich, by the way. It's
No.
not the worker bees who get rich. But I do miss that as well. And on the rare occasions where I did go to Capitol Hill, I was always amazed, folks, and please do this. You don't need any business on Capitol Hill. You just go up to one of the entrances and you put your backpack on the X-ray machine and you go in. It's yours. It's your building. So that always impressed me. Briefcase in hand, I'd go in there in my dress blues, and I thought, wow, I'm in the Capitol.
Yeah.
It never ceased to amaze me.
I used to walk to work every morning, Chuck, and I would always walk through the Capitol building from the House side, through the rotunda, through the old U.S. Senate chamber, out the door of the U.S. Senate chamber today, and on to my senator's office. But that's how I walk to work every morning, because it gave me a thrill. And sometimes I'd have time to stop at Tip O'Neill's Wednesday press conference, usually in the speaker's lobby on the House side, and listen to Tip and whoever else was speaking in those press conferences. I think it was a Wednesday. That's what I recall. But it's a great opportunity to be able to work in Washington, D.C. Anyone who has that opportunity, I encourage you to take it, because you can learn a lot working either in the U.S. Capitol building or at the Pentagon, or in the old executive office building, or for that matter, in the White House itself. You can learn a lot.
Yep, and we need you, right? This is about you and me and Alan and everyone else. It's about us. But Alan, thank you for a terrific show. Again, folks, we're solving the live problem, because we really do appreciate the interaction, right? That's what we're working on. So we'll get that back going. But again, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing your time with us, and we'll see you sooner than you think.
And dare to talk to your member of Congress in a way you can proudly say, Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava. Good night, everybody.
All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think, huh?